plan for today are two primary things. The board is responsible for approving or denying applications for exemption from property taxes. So we will deal with those today. The County Board of Equalization, as well as the Local Board of Equalization, is also responsible for adding any property omitted from the tax roll. And we have a list of property our office has found that was not on the tax roll when we mailed assessment notices. And we're going to present that for the board's action. We do have one appeal that we scheduled for today, but it's a property that our appraiser met with the property owner just yesterday, and he has a recommendation for the board on that. He talked to the property owner just before 5 o'clock yesterday, so that guy's not going to come in. So we won't actually have somebody here, but that was the only appeal we have for today. Now what we're looking at for the other 2 days we've scheduled, is it 22nd and 23rd? We have an appointment scheduled all day on the 22nd and not even to noon on the 23rd. Our appraisers have been meeting with property owners, and a large share of those probably won't come to argue there either, but we'll probably wind up with 30 to 40 appeals on those 2 days.
Shannon, are you doing omits today or
yes.
Next? Okay.
Yep. And that's what we can start here. You have a list. It says omits for 2015. Omits is just our abbreviation of property that was omitted from the tax roll. It is the county board's responsibility to add property to the tax roll. 100 years ago when this law was created, the county assessor brought in a tax roll in a book form and gave it to the commissioners, and you were supposed to review it and make sure all the property in the county was on it. Well, that's not so practical, but we always do find things that we dropped, and we've got a list here of them. If you look at that list, we've got property owner is Engel. That is a mobile home that was in Meade County, got a moving permit in Meade County to move it here, but because they got the moving permit in Meade County, we didn't know it was moving here. Somehow we found it, so we're going to add a value of $4,000 for that. Wessel, that is another mobile home. That was part of a reappraisal project we did out at Blue Wing, and with some changes there, it just was mistakenly dropped, and we figured that out right after assessment notices were mailed. We're going to add $32,500 for that. Logan is a mobile home. We thought it left, and we found it. It's still here. When we thought it left, we took it off the tax roll, and then we found it was still here, so we're going to add $5,200 for that. The last two there, Dakota Storage and West River Properties, are buildings in Quinn that the local board actually looked at that tax roll that we gave them and found some buildings that were not on the tax roll. And I think they were all recently built. Of course, there's no building permit required in Quinn, or if there is, we don't get them, but I doubt there is. But anyways, the local board pointed that out to us. They did not add them at value. They just told us you're missing these buildings. So the county board now has to add those. So those are the properties that have been omitted. I would suggest you make a motion to add these properties to the tax roll at the value indicated.
Do you need each name called, or does Karen have those?
Karen has the list.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll second.
Just as a review, Dakota Storage, West River Properties, Engel, Wessel, and Logan, is that correct?
That's true.
And did you make a motion?
Buskird and I second, sir.
Okay, we have motion and a second to add those. Any discussion?
I just have one. You know, we always deal with mobile homes. Isn't there some way the equalization treasurers can get together and try to convince the legislature to change something? I don't know what, but something.
That's a good idea. We ought to try that.
And then you try to tell me that it hasn't worked. The legislature don't want to, or you guys don't know how to fix it?
Maybe a combination of don't want to and don't know how to do it right. There is a problem because they move. And the treasurers, for the most part across the South Dakota, are scared that we're gonna lose taxes on one of these if they move and we don't collect the taxes ahead of time. So they have to be treated separately, special, and that's what creates most of the problem for us.
What if we just treat them like they're real property?
Yep, I'd love to do that. I've made lots of arguments to legislators and Department of Revenue and our treasurer, and I've got nowhere so far.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? If not, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carried.
And so you know the process, what happens here, is by state statute, you are adding property to the tax roll, and what you're gonna sign is a notice that's gonna be sent to the property owner. And because the property owner didn't get an assessment notice here, that's his assessment notice, and he has, I think it's 15 days to come back and argue if he thinks this value is wrong.
Sure.
So we could see one of these back later, on our later dates. Probably not. But that's what the law does, and that's why we deal with this on the first day. So that allows us that time. So that's omitted property. Now what's going to happen next is our exempt property. And we have split these up into several different lists. The most simple is titled 100% exempt. That is the properties that have made application for exemption from property taxes, 100% exempt. They have been exempt in the past. The application comes to our office, and we investigate the property and make a recommendation to the board, and those we recommend that the property be exempt. Those are very simple. The partial exempts are the same thing, except for some reason there's some other use made of the property and only part of the property is exempt from taxes. We split it into two lists, but otherwise they're the same. We have a list for new exempts. That is properties that have not been exempt in the past, have made application for exemption, and everything appears to meet the statutory requirements, and we recommend that you approve the exemption. They're just new for this year. Then the list that says exempts denied, that isn't denied yet. The county commission decides on these, but my office has looked at these, and I make a recommendation to you that you deny the exemption on those, but I want to address each one of those individually. The board still needs to take action and maybe would want to approve the exemption on it, but we can go through those individually. I would suggest that you make a motion and act on the partial exempts, the 100% exempts at least. And if you have any questions on the new properties, I could answer those, but I make a recommendation that they be approved as exempt.
Do you want separate motions for the exempts and the partials?
I don't know why you would need that.
Okay.
Just a question, if I could, Chair. Trinity Lutheran was partial, now they're 100%? I read it yesterday, I have to find it.
What?
You have partial, and then 2015 you have 100%.
Were you looking last year? Was it partial last year?
Yep. If that's what it says, partial exempts 2015, and you have Trinity Lutheran at the bottom on the first page of partials, and then Trinity Lutheran 100% new exempt.
Okay, that's not last year. That must be Trinity Lutheran has two properties. One must be partially exempt, the other must be 100% exempt. A partial exemption, let's say a church has a property, but they use that property for something that's not church related half of the time, so it might be 50% exempt from taxes.
You're right, Shannon, because it says, sorry, I didn't see the lots. I just saw block 96. It says 1 through 7 is 100% and 17 through 24 is partial. So thank you.
Is Trinity Lutheran the church that's the other side? Okay, their parking lot they rent out for parking.
Okay.
And I think that is the part that's partially exempt. and they come in and they tell us how much of the parking lot and how often they rent out. We come up with a percentage.
Thank you.
For churches, the church and the parsonage are exempt. Parking lots, I take it, are,
I consider a parking lot part of the church property if it's being used for church parking.
when I look at some of these, like Dove Christian, there's, they got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different lots that they own. And I know that the church should be on some of it, but Oldfield subdivision, I don't know where that's at.
Where's Dove Christian?
Oh, it's the one on the interstate where,
Where they had the rodeo?
Yeah.
the rodeo,
Okay.
the rodeo grounds.
They have the church on one lot, the parking lot on another lot, and then they have just a couple of lots that surround it that are nothing but grass. They did a rodeo on one, along with the parking lot. They have no other use going on there. It's difficult to say it's not church property when it's not being used for anything else.
Property, but it's difficult to say that's being used for church purposes.
So make it taxable.
I don't want to get in that fight. I'd like to. Cut this list down by about half.
I can see what you're saying, but it's difficult to argue with them that it's not church property. Now, there are certainly churches that own more land than that.
Oh, yeah.
Ours.
And hospitals.
Mr. Chair, if I might, hate to ask, but what I'm going to is that Eco Park over there exempt, partial exempt, or not exempt?
That'll be one of them on the new exempt list because it was taxable last year. They have made application for exemption, and that is on that list that says new exempt, Trinity Lutheran, third one down. So an explanation of that is the church, I think there used to be a motel there. The church bought the lot, took the building down, and it was a bare lot for a while. They did talk to me about it being exempt. I don't know as if they actually made application. But anyways, I talked to them about it, and they weren't using it for a church purpose at all. They weren't even using it for parking. In fact, they had a sign up said, keep out of it. Their plan was, they told me, and now they have developed it into what they call a prayer park. Now, a prayer park might justify a whole lot of church property. Any church could say that about a lot. But they have created this park, and it is open to the public. Absolutely anybody can use it. We could wander over there this morning if we wanted to. It is open to the public. Arguable that it is church purpose. State law requires that for an exemption, it must be owned by the church and used for a religious purpose. Their religious purpose, they state, is prayer park. Now, with some exempt entities or with some property owners, I will tell them that your use of this property is a very good use. It's very generous. That's awfully nice. You let everybody do this. But that doesn't meet statutory requirements. Okay, so I'm presenting this to you. The church says it is a prayer park. You have the decision of whether it's exempt or not. I would agree with Ron. I was not willing to argue with him on that because I think I would lose that argument.
Well, at a minimum, Mr. Chair, if I might, at a minimum, can you next year identify it as what it is as opposed to just Trinity Lutheran?
That's the owner of it. Trinity Lutheran
But in
owns it.
parentheses, put Eco Park or Prayer Park or whatever, so we know that it's not the church itself or the parking lot or the whatever.
I suppose we could put some identifier there.
And it was advertised as an eco park. That's the way it was sold, and
Yeah, they have some environmental use to it. They told me about drainage and plants, and I don't understand all that and really don't care.
just so the folks know, some government taxpayer money went into that park, not a lot, but it was sold to West Dakota Water Development District as Eco Park. So there's some dollars went into it, some taxpayer dollars went into that park. Thank you.
I have one question. Birthright of Rapid City. What do they do?
What list did you see that on?
Charitable, 100% charitable.
100% exempt. I didn't bring the list of those properties down here. Birthright, I am pretty sure, is an organization that helps young pregnant women. I don't know if it's so much abortion as it is just plain financial, emotional help.
That to me is really critical. Whether they're espousing some sort of agenda for what should be done, what shouldn't be done, or if they're just generally helping people or helping the young lady. To me, it makes a difference.
Did you find it?
I look at each one of these and what they do, they are doing something to actually help them. There might be some more going on there, but there actually is some charitable work there.
Cemetery here.
Any other questions?
Isn't that one? That's fine, that's okay. Okay, that's fine.
How about our favorite place down in Keystone?
That's on the list for 100% exempt. Supposedly they, and not supposedly, they are holding church services in that building.
Name of that?
Keystone Project. And it will be,
You finally gave up, huh?
well, yeah, because they were holding services there. Is it under, thought it'd be under religious.
Yeah, it's up there, and I don't see it.
Is it under the bill?
But it is exempt. Keystone Project is on the third to the last page, about 2/3 of the way down.
Yeah.
It's actually under the list of charities or something, and it should be church.
Thank you.
Okay, well, we fought the good fight anyway for a few years.
For several years. And if at some point it looks like they're not doing anything with it, then circumstances could change. It's difficult to know when they're not using it, but we do have a couple of churches on the list that I recommend denial that are not being used. But Keystone Project, they are meeting there, and I talked to them last summer, last fall, just to make sure.
Okay, anything further?
I would suggest you make a motion and vote on the 100% exempt, the partial exempt, and the new exempt property if you don't have any questions on those. I'd like to go through the denial list.
I'll move approval. Second.
We have a motion and a second covering those three categories. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, exempts denied. This is a list of properties that I recommend to you that you deny them, but I'm going to state why on each one of these, and I think you should consider them. The ultimate decision is the board's. I just make a recommendation. Dakota Baptist Convention. I'm going to have to go to my notes. This was taxable in 2014. It is a church. It is a church in New Underwood. It was taxable in 2014 because it's not being used. We've had appraisers from our office out there. It hasn't been used for several years. A neighbor told us it hasn't been used for 2 years. The church just sort of dissolved. But it is very much a church property, it's just not being used. That's Dakota Baptist Convention. Dakota Baptist Convention, Southern Baptist. That is another church, that's in Box Elder. It's a church that is also not being used. It was taxable in 2014. It hasn't been used for many years. We've had appraisers out there several times since 2011. Just recently, yesterday, I had an appraiser go out and look at it, and it's sort of fallen apart. They need nobody's maintaining it. It hasn't been used for several years. Still very much a church, not being used for anything else. Both of these, the Baptist church, the Baptist conference or whatever, takes ownership of these when the local church dissolves. So the office in Rapid City here has made application for exemption on both of these properties. The application came in late on both of them. The second one here, we got the application in February of this year. Both of them came in February. State law requires that to be exempt, property owner has to make an application by November 1st. So my recommendation to you is denial on these because although it is a church, owned by a church, it's not being used as a church, and the application was late.
Mr. Chair, if I might, what kind of numbers are we talking about for assessment? Roughly.
48,000? 77,000?
Thank you.
No, I would put this in the same category as we can give a liquor license. We issue a liquor license, and if it's not used for a year, we can revoke it. But what constitutes the use? Well, I've always maintained if they go out and sell beer one day a year on that property during the rally, they've used it. How about if the church says, hey, we go over there, once a year, twice a year and pray in it? You have a problem?
You're describing the Keystone Project. These two churches are not being used.
Good enough.
I am not a politician that is elected that's going to make a church pay taxes. I just recommend to you that their application was late and they're not being used.
And they can come back at a further time to appeal it, did you say?
Okay, that's another process that happens here. The reason we do these exempt on this day is because when you take action on these and deny an exemption, the property owner has so many days again to come back and argue before you. That's why we do it this first day. So on the 22nd or 23rd, they could come back and appear before you. And I have contacted all of these property owners on this list that I've made recommendation of denial and told them that we'd be meeting and deciding on this today and what my recommendation was and why. So they're all aware of it and could have showed up today if they wanted to. They still have the right legally to come back so many days later. And I thought maybe somebody'd be here.
On Dakota Baptist Convention or Southern Baptist?
What property?
Over here?
The Dakota Southern Baptist.
Okay.
Property owner is here.
I do concede that there is nothing going on.
Would you come up and identify yourself, please?
I'm Garvin Golden, Executive Director, Treasurer of the Dakota Baptist Convention. And I do concede that there's nothing going on with those two properties. We're more than willing to pay taxes on them if that's what we need to do. The Box Elder property, we did not know that property was reverting back to us until I think it was in December. So that's why we were late on that one. I have no excuse for the other. We have no problem with paying the taxes on that. But we're hoping to have some religious services going on there in the future. And we thought we'd already have something going on in New Underwood by now, but like several of you probably know, best laid plans don't always come through, so, but that's, I just wanted, you to know that I am here and we want to pay our taxes and we want to see that property used for the right purposes.
Thank you for your honesty, sir.
Thank you. Okay, do you want motions on like these two now, or do you want to?
I would suggest that, and then I'll go on down with the others.
I'll make denial on the Baptist Convention, both of those, two properties, and then hopefully he'll come back in 15 days if there's an issue.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Thank you for being here. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Actually, he made me do it, so it wasn't a politician's fault. I'm kidding, Janet.
Okay, I'm going to do two more next, but I need to ask you to ignore Rapid City Regional Hospital. That application for exemption was withdrawn. I talked to the hospital about that. They have a property that they plan on putting an urgent care on, and the urgent care didn't get there as quick as they thought it would. They made application for exemption, and their construction just didn't happen. But I didn't talk to the hospital until this list was already presented to you. That should have been withdrawn beforehand, but is now. The hospital does not have an application for an exemption for this property here, so that one's withdrawn. There is Dakota Conference Corporation, a Seventh-day Adventist. That is a parsonage here in Rapid City. The parsonage is up for sale. I don't see that it's listed now. I wonder if they've got a signed offer on it. But the pastor of that church lives somewhere else. It's not being used. A parsonage is exempt from taxes when it's being used as a parsonage. This is not. It's been empty for about a year. So my recommendation is to deny the exemption on that because it's not being used. Volunteers of America is a charitable organization out of Sheridan, Wyoming. They bought a property in Rapid here and have plans to make it a park, and the city will take over the park. I think take ownership of it. But at present, Volunteers of America has done nothing with the property. They've purchased it and done some cleanup, but nothing charitable is going on it. I talked to that organization. She was very nice. She said they turned in an application for exemption, not knowing exactly the laws in South Dakota, but pretty confident she wasn't going to get it. When I explained the law to her, she was okay with it. Nobody is going to be here for that. So I make a recommendation that on those two properties, you deny the exemption because they're not being used.
Any questions on these two?
Once again, Mr. Chair, what kind of value are we talking about? Assessment value, roughly?
The parsonage, $258,000. Volunteers of America. $52,000.
That's probably just a bare lot then.
It is now. It had a couple trailer houses on it, but it is now.
Okay, thank you.
So I will deny the exemption on both those properties.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion is second. Further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
The last one you have is Rapid City Peace Officers Association. The Rapid City Peace Officers used to meet in a building up on top of the hill on Mount Rushmore Road. They sold that. They have a property north of Menards now. They purchased that property in April of 2014. They are meeting in that property. They use it for their meetings. They also let some community groups use it as well. They made application for exemption on March 12th of this year. My recommendation is to deny it only because we did not receive an application by the November 1st deadline, and a representative of the Peace Officers Association is here.
Morning.
Morning. Courtney Claiborne on behalf of the peace officers, and I certainly appreciate your taking the time today to hear this. By way of background, I think, I'm not sure all of you were here last year when we discussed this specific piece of property. I noticed at least 2 new faces, but the history on this was that the Peace Officers Association initially were meeting on a building on Catron Boulevard that they, in May of last year, sold. Early in 2014, their exemption had been denied, so I appeared on their behalf and argued for that exemption. And during that time, and I actually was looking up the minutes, and it was basically just the summary of the decision and not the conversation. But we left that meeting letting the commission know that something was going to happen. That was that we were swapping for a building that would be more expensive when placed back on the tax roll, literally within a month. Actually, it was a little less than 30 days that it transferred. And then the peace officers would occupy this new building out on Elgin. So that was kind of the backdrop of what we left with. The understanding is that these properties, the exemption would just switch. One would come on, one would go off. The peace officers subsequently were not aware when they got the notice that they needed to file the formal application. So the issues today are 2. One is the late filing, and I just went through the 2014 exemptions that were denied and subsequently reinstated, and I noticed in 2014 there were 4 late applications that were made, including 2 under the religious section for the Our Lady of Perpetual Help in the United Methodist Church, 2 under 10.4.9.1, which is charitable, which is also where this exemption applies for the Black Hills Area Habitat for Humanities, as well as the Rapid City Club for Boys. The actual minutes do not tell me why those were accepted or what the procedures are for late applications or what the basis is, but I think if the basis is good faith or at least an understanding of something, not needing to do something, this one would certainly qualify because, like I say, last year the discussion was had in full about the swapping of these properties and how one would go off and go on. Secondly, as far as the exemption itself, I would just note that this organization has had this tax exempt status for at least as long as anyone can remember. And again, last year it was initially denied based upon use, but subsequently this board reversed that. I did have them indicate to me how the current building is being used, and so far this year the members have used it privately for 3 days. There have been 4 FOP meetings. The South Dakota Highway Patrol has used it for 6 days. Other nonprofit associations, including schools, have used it for 4 days. And then the bulk of the activity is agency training, including the county officers use it for their defensive tactic drills. So I believe it's still meeting all of the qualifications necessary. And so we would ask that in light of the fact that this board has looked at prior late applications, that they accept this one. And again, the use of the building has not changed, and so we believe that it is appropriate. And I would entertain questions because I think there's a second issue as to how, and I don't know the answer to how the Catron building has or should be reclassified.
Any questions?
Shannon, he could come back in 15 days anyway and tell us, you know, that the same thing. So if we approved it or denied it today, I mean, if we denied it today, we could come back in 15 days and.
If you approved it, we probably wouldn't hear from him again.
Well, that's
but-
why, that's
but
what I
the-
mean, sorry.
Which is a benefit.
The law allows him so many days, and I don't know if it's 15, but on the 22nd or 23rd, that's when we're meeting. That's why we do this now. So, yeah, he's here now, but the law allows him that next day.
So he can come back and say, you know, I just put my application in wrong in 15 days, and we can approve it then anyway, right?
He could have a whole different story in a couple days. The law does allow him to come back. We do this now. I just contacted the property owners, so they were here when you're doing it now.
Thank you. I'll move approval on, meaning letting him have his exemption for the fact that he can come back anyway, and number two, they are using it for the right reasons, and they've had it before for a very long time, so that would be a motion.
You're moving, well, do we have a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second, and clarify the motion for me, please.
To put it back on the tax rolls. Or not, non-tax rolls, sorry, the exemption.
I'm going to
From
make
the
a
tax
substitute
rolls.
motion.
Okay.
That we grant him partial exemption and have the Equalization Department look and see at what percentage is used for something other than charitable and tax exempt items.
We have a substitute motion being offered. Is there a second?
I'd second that.
Okay, we have a second to the substitute motion.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to comment to that.
Yes.
I have talked to, not Mr. Courtney, but one of the police officers about what they're using it for. There's several, and he went through several. I didn't see any uses that would make it taxable. So I anticipate that with the information he's given me and what I've heard, it would be 100% exempt.
Okay, because when you started, you said, well, they're using it for that, and then they're using it for some other purposes.
And he just went through all of those. It isn't just their club. They do let some other groups use it, like South Dakota Highway Patrol. But I don't see how that would make it taxable.
Courtney, there's no other outside groups that.
And I can only.
But you did say that there was a few days that they used it for personal reasons.
Right, there were that the members reserved it for themselves. But my understanding is those private events are associated with FOP events. You just have to reserve it in your own name as opposed to saying that it's going to be something. And quite honestly, I can't tell you the nature or circumstances of those 3 days, but those would be the 3 days out of 31, 37, about 45 days total is what I have here.
Just can't argue with attorneys, can you?
Well, my bigger question would be the Catron property. And like I said, for full disclosure, I think we discussed last year the fact that when that went into private hands, that would come back onto the tax rolls. And so you do have that split year that I think needs to be addressed as part of the issue of bringing at least that property on from May 22nd of 14, making it, and that's like $670,000 if I remember right. This property was 300 and something. So there does need to be, I think, some adjustment made there.
That property was added to the tax roll for that part of the year that it became taxable, but their generous contribution to the tax roll doesn't grant them an exemption on the next property they own.
No, I just wanted to make sure that, because that was part of the discussion before, that was coming on.
Well, I guess with that explanation, I just thought that perhaps it was being used for something other than charitable purposes.
And Mr. Chair, additionally, we have the issue of lateness, and I know there's been several previous commissioners that have been really, really harsh on being late. And so
The law
that's
is
another consideration, of course.
The law is very clear that an application must be made by November 1st. The board has approved some properties that have made late application, but many times, if not every time, that late application is a property that's already exempt, and they are, there's a term for it, when it's already exempt, they're just filing a statement to say that the use has not changed. The law is more stringent on properties that are new and asking for an exemption. That application and that deadline is more critical for the new properties.
Mr. Chair, can you repeat that one more time? If it's past usage, you're saying there's a lot more leniency. Is that spelled out in statute someplace, or is that just interpretation?
Both. The law is very clear that an application must be made by November 1st.
Irrespective of?
Either one, yeah, whether the property has been exempt or not. But a property that has been exempt in the past is just reaffirming that nothing has changed. The law is more stringent on the initial application.
And that's in statute?
Yes, but it is not, there's nothing that spells it out that clearly.
The same statute applies to both. It's 10.
That's true.
It's 10-4-15, and it makes no distinction between continued or new. And in fact, it says any property that needs this exemption needs to apply from or by November 1st. And as I pointed out, there were the actual equalization minutes of this committee for some reason aren't shown for 2013, 2012, or 2011, but in 2014, there were 4 late applications that were approved, and it doesn't have enough information to tell the circumstances.
I understand, and that would be nice to know, but obviously we can't at this point.
Any other comments? We have a substitute motion, and I think in order to keep everything straight, we'll have a roll call.
Buskerud?
I want to keep everything straight, I'm going to vote yes.
Garabee?
Aye.
Adcock?
No.
Troutman?
No.
Peterson?
No. Motion failed. Back to the original motion.
Also roll call, Mr. Chair.
You what?
Roll call.
Just want to remind everybody that, the admission was that 3 out of 45 days are used for something else, and that's 7% of the time. Now, so, no, it's not 100%.
And for clarification, the statement was, I am not sure the stated use of the building on those days. I can just tell you whose name wrote down that they were going to use it, and they were members of the FOP. So they didn't provide me anything as to the substance of those meetings.
Okay. Is everyone clear on the motion?
Buskerud?
No.
Garabee?
No.
Adcock?
Aye.
Troutman?
Aye.
Peterson?
Aye.
I'm going to remind you, just because we haven't talked about it, if we're Board of Adjustment, we need 4 votes for something to pass.
Okay,
So
so
that doesn't pass.
Neither the substitute motion nor this motion passed. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yep.
3-2.
Appreciate the reminder. Well, we're back to square one.
So it remains denied at this point.
Okay.
If I may, I would encourage the board to at least take up the substitute motion again. And because I'm fairly comfortable it's going to fit, and if the substitute motion, as I understood it, was to approve pending the determination, I believe it'll likely pass that test.
I don't think you can make the same motion twice
Okay.
at this point. Does anyone argue with that?
I know I can't. I don't know about somebody else.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I would agree with your determination.
You what?
I would agree with your determination.
Okay.
Case closed at this point.
If we were considered the prevailing side, can one of us on the prevailing side bring it up again?
Give notice of intent to reconsider, or?
Yeah, that's what I'm curious about. Okay,
Well, if it takes 4 to prevail, no.
No, I
that's
didn't.
what I was trying to figure out.
I'll make a motion to grant them exemption of 93%, a partial exemption of 93%.
Okay, I'll second that.
Okay.
Yes.
I'd make the substitute motion if I went, Mr. Chair, that they come back during the appeal process and with the evidence of what happened last year on the late applications. Late is late. So that'd be my substitute motion, is come back next.
Okay, we have a substitute motion. Is there a second?
Second.
And just for clarification, you want me to come back and provide information of why this board approved late applications in the past?
Yes, sir.
And I'm not sure where I would get that. It's my only.
Still available.
It's not recorded?
Yeah, but I don't know how long those recordings are kept.
I guess that wouldn't be the point. The point would be to come back and just show us in those 15 days, when you come back, that it needs to be exempt, and those other organizations are part of the peace officers, and you can prove that it's 100% peace officers.
And just as a point of clarification, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I do remember the conversation that you mentioned, Courtney. I remember that conversation. So, yeah, it sounds like we goofed up somewhere as far as getting that application in. But I do remember you saying, we're getting rid of this building, we're getting a new one. And so I can certainly support you in what you have said.
And I think to follow up on that, and and I would agree, late is late. And I think from the legal perspective, if it's a good faith or a good cause, which I presume would be the standard any court would apply, that conversation was how everybody left the building on that day, was saying something's coming on, something's going off. And it was, like I said, within a month. It was less than a month from the hearing, 21 days.
Understanding, Mr. Chair, you're absolutely right, late's late, and there are mitigating circumstances, and that's probably what happened last go-around. On those 3 or 4 applications, there was some mitigating circumstances that the board decided to go with. But late's late.
Okay, we have a substitute motion and a second. Any further discussion on the substitute motion? We'll do the roll call again.
Buskerud?
Yes.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
Yes.
Troutman?
No.
Peterson?
No. Motion failed. We're back to the original motion of 93%. That's correct? Any further discussion on the original motion?
And once again, that was the 90.
93%.
Okay.
Partial exemption.
And at this point, I'll probably say no, because just come back and, to me, just come back in the 15 days and get this the way it's supposed to be, Courtney, instead
Yes.
of 93%.
The law allows him to come back anyways.
Okay, that's what I'm saying.
And I can certainly do that. I just would caution, I'm not sure what the Department of Equalization would have to satisfy that request. Because I obviously only have the public records, the minutes.
Maybe it's just because you're the most articulate person that has appeared before us.
I want to see you again.
I'm not sure that's a high bar then.
Second. I'm kidding.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Roll call.
Buskerud?
Yes.
Farabee?
Yes.
Hadcock?
No.
Troutman?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
So you got 93%.
93%.
I didn't hear it.
Yes.
And don't put down in the record how we come up with that.
They, Busker did it. 93%. He probably didn't mention all of his stuff, so it was probably 36%.
Okay, that is all of the the exempt properties. You just acted on all of those. The only other thing we have to do today is we actually scheduled an appeal, somebody that couldn't be here on one of those other 2 days. But Joe from our office was out and met with him Friday, just talked to him before 5 o'clock last night. He has a recommendation to make a small change in the assessment, and I'll let him state that. You can act on it, and then we're done.
For the date?
I'm Joe Dorn with the Department of Equalization. As Shannon mentioned, I spoke with the homeowner on Friday at his property, and then again yesterday. I'm making a recommendation for a value of $212,400. This person does qualify for ag and has some ag buildings, which gives them an exemption, so the true and full value will be $205,600.
That'd be my motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second, and I guess my question would be, do we have paperwork in front of us that deals with this, or?
You should have a page similar to this, but it doesn't have a recommendation on it because I wasn't able to make a recommendation at the time I had to turn it in.
Can you give us the breakdown? I guess I'm not right.
Buildings and land. You will find some of these as we go through those next 2 days where you might not have a piece of paper because we're still trying to talk to the property owner. Most of them we've got prepared, but occasionally we'll run into one like this.
Is this Maori?
Yes.
It is?
Yes.
Yeah.
The land value is going to be $55,300.
And that form is right behind the last page of the schedule.
Was he ag last year?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Okay, thank you. I would suggest you adjourn, but I was asked by Commissioner Farabee, and he says he talked to Commissioner Hadcock, wanted me to make a presentation on what the assessor's office does, and I'm prepared to do that. I've got a nice speech. It's going to be cool. But just those two commissioners requested that, and if the other commissioners want to stick around for it, fine.
I'm sure that would be beneficial to all of us, so you proceed. But we should adjourn first, is that correct?
Well,
Normally-
you are done with Board of Equalization.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Oh, wait, normally we just recess, don't we?
Yeah.
Recess.
That's right,
Second.
because the board will meet again.
Yeah, we recess. So do we need a motion for that, Karen?
Yes, got one.
I second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to go into recess. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried.
Now,
We're in
before you start, slight correction. I was doing that at the behest of Commissioner Hadcock, so there's some duress involved. So,
What'd you say? Jeez.
but go ahead with the presentation. I would
Did you say duress?
duress.
Holly is going to come out and make this screen work for me. My staff doesn't need to stick around. We're done with the board.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Can't do that?
I was asked to prepare something about what the assessor's office does and how we do it. So I will explain all of that. I'll go down with some notes. I don't have a PowerPoint presentation. There's a couple of things I'm going to try and draw on the screen. Sort of a whiteboard. This is going to be a fancy whiteboard when Holly makes it happen.
Deb and Chris, thanks for your time yesterday as well and explaining some of this to me. Poor ladies. Appreciated it.
What are you looking for?
Calculator. These are expensive? I got about 10 at my shop if you need any. Thanks, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You bet.
I like those.
Where'd you get that? Whose are they?
Is that? No, I don't know. That must be one that they got back here.
Borrow some more.
I really got some one day that I really liked, and now she can't find them again, so.
These are nice. You guys want some more donuts? There's a lot back there. You should take them to your office. Miss Luann, you want to do that for me? Okay, thank you.
Oh, no, thanks.
You don't need them, you got enough
I
rolls.
got it. I work hard. I gotta have them.
Don't you think he has enough rolls? Don't you think he has enough rolls? You don't need enough. I'm teasing. Carol, second that motion? And my brother used to say that, that's when I was skinny. He's like, you want a donut? And I'd be like, yeah, let's get enough rolls. And all right, kids, that was funny.
I could eat all of them, but geez, they just.
Start bringing fruit and salad for you. Good luck with that. That's rabbit food. Like the Vikings for a minute. People in my family are with the Vikings. Of course, there's
I do like the Vikings. They just.
7 brothers and a couple nephews, all have teams. How about that?
Here's your forms that are.
We're still not
I didn't give South Dakota a professional football team, but then Minnesota won.
I'm gonna go get those donuts for you. Anybody else need a donut? Where, this is I give away.
huge.
You want our part of it?
I'll take like a very
Go
little
ahead,
piece.
go ahead, go ahead.
Oh, thank you.
You bet.
That's all right.
Well, it shouldn't have.
Actually,
She hit
it, but.
Yeah, I think I did.
That cordless mouse?
Okay. Yeah, but you would get out of work. I think that was the difference.
Girl, I think.
Yep,
Yeah,
I'm,
right there.
I'm good. No? Okay, sister.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Busker, do you need another one?
Thank you. You do not.
Okay,
I go on vacation.
Thanks, Greg.
thank you.
I
Got all my
just-
peppers?
Jerry's.
All right, we are ready to go. As I said, this is not going to be a PowerPoint. This is just a presentation by myself. I've got a few things I'd like to write on for like a whiteboard. Otherwise, it's just listening to me. The county assessor is required by state statute to assess real property or real estate for property tax purposes. And in South Dakota, property is assessed at full market value. So our job is to appraise all property in the county at its full market value, State law requires us to consider all 3 traditional approaches to value. Like any real estate appraiser that's working, they consider 3 approaches to value to estimate market value. The first is a cost approach. That's an estimate of the cost to build a building brand new, a replacement cost, subtract any depreciation if the building is old, and then add land to that. That's a cost approach to value.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, Commission. Do you have to do it at full market value?
Yes. The law requires all property at full and true value.
And that's just this state, or other states do the same thing?
It varies. Some states are the same. Some states, the assessed value is a percentage of full and true. So the assessor has to estimate full and true, but then the assessment notice goes out at 60% of that or something. And then taxable value is even less. But they still have to calculate market value.
So why?
In South Dakota, our assessed value is market value.
So why was it lower before and you're having to bring it back up? They were doing them at 80%?
Well, the law requires that all property in South Dakota be assessed at full and true value. Then there's another statute that says that it has to be at least at 85%.
So we don't have to do full market value. We can put them at 85% if we want.
There's a law that says property is assessed at full and true value. That law is very clear. Then there's another one that says at least at 85%. But in South Dakota, our taxable value is 85% of market value. If we were not assessing at 85, the state would raise our values up. In the case of Pennington County, we are assessed at over 85%, so our taxable value is less. And I'll get to that, but the law is very clear, 100% full and true market value.
Except we can do it at 85%.
Has to be at least at 85.
Thank you.
I think part of what might be slipping through the cracks here is that in order to figure out whether it's 85 or 65%, you still have to get the true value to start with.
Yep.
To calculate the percentage on.
That's right. And I'll get to that later, how we get to that taxable value. But we are required by state statute, very clear, 100% market value.
Including owner-occupied.
Owner-occupied is a levy. That's just a tax levy.
But owner-occupied is assessed at true and fair, then
Yep.
the discount's applied later.
On the tax, on the levy, not on the value. So, yep, all property except ag property is 100% market value.
That was my next question. So there's a qualifier. It's not all property, it's all except.
Yeah, when I start here, I will eventually talk about ag, but yeah, we're talking about non-ag property because we all know that ag property is not at market value.
So it's all non-ag property.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, so I was talking about the cost approach. The cost approach is that estimate of the cost to build less depreciation and plus land value. Every county assessor's office in the country relies upon the cost approach as a method to calculate market or to estimate market value. It is very easily applied in mass appraisal practice, and it's very consistently applied. And it is applicable to most properties. Another approach to value is the sales comparison approach. This is a direct comparison of the subject property to sales of similar properties with adjustments for differences because no two properties are exactly the same. A sales comparison approach is very applicable to your typical residential property. When a property owner buys a house, they tend to look at what else they could buy and how much they could get it for, and that's how they buy a house. So it works very well for a typical residential property. We use a sales comparison approach along with our cost approach, and most county assessors' offices in the country use a sales comparison approach. We started using ours, using a multiple regression analysis about 3 or 4 years ago, and we get better at it. It doesn't apply to every property. There are some properties where there just simply are no comparable sales. There's always a comparable sale, but sometimes the comparable sales for a cement plant are not readily available. So it works for your typical residential property. The third approach to value is an income approach. The income approach is an estimate of value based on the income producing potential of a property. Think of an apartment building. Many times an investor will buy an apartment building and he will have a very good idea how much money he can make off that, and he decides, I want a 7% rate of return on that, and that's how he calculates value. An income approach is applicable to some commercial properties and industrial properties. It is not so easily applied in mass appraisal, especially in our world, because it's difficult to get enough property owners to give us income and expense information to apply it in mass. Now, like any real estate appraiser that's working for the bank out there, we have to reconcile all of the value indications we get from those three approaches and determine which approach is the most applicable to every single property. The income approach just simply isn't applicable to a typical residential property because a homeowner doesn't consider how much he could get for rent and look at comparable rentals. And we can do an income approach, but it's just not so appropriate for a residential property.
So you would use in a specific area, you would decide which of the three applies, not the entire county.
Specific area or specific property? More by the property than by the area, but both, yeah.
Which of the three do?
Which is the most applicable and most reliable indication?
Okay, thank you.
Now, we're doing mass appraisal, okay? We cannot spend a significant amount of time on a single property. That appraiser that works for the bank out there, he's got all week to work on an appraisal for that house. Now, they tend to do more houses in a week, but he could, if he wanted, spend 2 weeks on it. Well, we can't do that. We are appraising all 52,000 properties in this county every year. We have to do that. We've got a year to do it with our staff. It is a mass appraisal application. We can't spend the time that they do. Now, that appraiser, that independent appraiser, he will also take mass appraisal jobs. I talked to an appraiser here recently who bid on and received a job to do appraisals on a power line. All of the properties down a power line easement for 50 miles. That's a mass appraisal job. He's not going to do an appraisal on every single one of those. Property boundaries, easements, stuff like that. There are other appraisers that do mass appraisal jobs. That's what we're doing. There are also companies that do what we do on a contract basis. We could hire a company to come in and reappraise all of the properties in Pennington County. There's companies that do that. It would cost $1.5 million to get it done, but there are others other than county assessors that are doing what we're doing.
I hate to interrupt, but about 20 years ago, was that what happened? The contract was for the whole county or just part of the county?
I don't know, and I'm not sure if it was exactly 20 years ago, but sometime about then.
Neighborhood. Do you remember that, Ron?
I don't remember, I remember when it was done, but, and it's been that long.
It's roughly 20.
I don't know.
Many,
I think they did most of it.
Many times the county will bid out certain areas or all of the residential.
That's what I'm asking.
Or maybe all of the commercial. The company, you throw enough money at them, they'll do whatever you want. And I don't know what was done back then.
I think a lot of it was rural, and you know, they flew over, and there was a lot of property that wasn't even on the rolls, as I recall. And so, I mean, I just thought you'd enlighten the. You remember that, don't you, Lindell? You don't remember the contract? It was quite a hullabaloo about because it was a hell of a price.
It certainly is. It amounts to about $15 a property, depending on what kind of property and whether it's rural or in town. But there are companies that do it.
Does state law specify frequency of physical reappraisal or
no.
What are the guidelines?
No, state law does not.
Purposely left that alone, huh?
Maybe, yeah. There are some states that do. Some states require the county assessor to actually physically look at every property every 2 years, 4 years. There are some states that require that. South Dakota has no requirement. We abide by standards of practice from the International Association of Assessing Officers. That is the guideline in the industry. And they say for a county like ours, rural and urban, with a mix like what we have, we should be looking at every 5 to 7 years. And that is our goal.
Physically on site?
Yes, physically on site. As I said, we reappraise every property every year, but physically on site every 5 to 7 years.
And like I said, the state hasn't...
The state has no requirement. Okay, now, the state does use those professional standards from the IAAO, but there's no state law or administrative rule. Now, every property is reappraised every year, whether we're there or not. And we hear arguments from property owners, nothing's changed. Well, that's not true. You might not have done anything to your property, but it did get older. And many times you did do something. You painted the living room or did something to it. But if nothing ever happened, even if we ignore the fact that it got older, our market changed. Our market will always change. Seldom is a market flat. So we still have to make those adjustments for the market. So every property gets reappraised every year. We'd like to be on-site looking at it once every 5 to 7 years, and that's our goal, and we will be on track with that in the next couple of years. Now, we measure the accuracy of our assessed value by neighborhood every year, and we identify priority neighborhoods to go look at every house, house by house. We look at how accurate our numbers are by neighborhood. And at the end of the year, we will decide which neighborhoods are the priority to go do a reappraisal project on. And we set those priorities up. And we've got those priorities this year, and we're going to go look at those neighborhoods. And next year, we will look at all of those neighborhoods again and decide which ones need looked at the following year. When we go out and we do that, we look at every single house, house by house, on the property. And we are looking at the property data that we have. Size of the house, condition of the house, the quality of the construction, garage, basement, all of those factors that influence value. We have our property card and we're looking at that, and we're looking at the property and checking to see if it's right. Checking to see if somebody did something that we didn't know about. Checking to see if we've just got something wrong. And we go house by house. We obviously don't get inside every house. We're working during the day, and so are a lot of other people. So when we find somebody that is not home, we leave a card on the door. And we do that for 2 reasons. One, the old lady that lives next door is going to be telling them somebody was walking around your house yesterday. So we leave a card on the door so they know who was walking around their house. We also write some assumptions we make. The basement's finished. We will not look in windows. We can get a lot of trouble looking in windows, see stuff we shouldn't be seeing. So we will make some assumptions based on the neighborhood. If we're in a neighborhood that is 25 years old and everybody else has a finished basement, it's a likely assumption that the house we're standing in front of has a finished basement too. So we'll make that assumption, we'll put it on the card, and we'll leave it on the door. There is a note on that card to give us a call and come back, and we will look at their property. Some people do call us back. Some people toss it. But we leave a card so they know why we were there and what information we assumed. Now, we would like to look in every house, but that's simply not practical. Okay, people aren't home and they don't call us back. And really, we can stand outside a house and get enough information to know what that house is worth. If the paint is peeling and there's a cracked window, you probably don't have new carpets and a new kitchen inside that house. We can get enough information to do our job accurately enough from the outside. And if a property owner is home, we ask to look inside. If they do not want us, we walk away. We're not going to argue. The law allows us to inspect a property. It doesn't say we can walk through your bedroom, so we don't push it.
What rhyme or reason do you use to pick a neighborhood?
We look at all of the neighborhoods at the end of the year, and we measure the accuracy of our assessments in each of those neighborhoods.
But how do you pick a neighborhood? Is there any specific criteria you use to say this bounded by these streets, or how do you?
We have those boundaries drawn. They are they're boundaries, neighborhoods that have similar properties, similar demographics. It's if you were looking for a certain type of house, you would be looking in this neighborhood, and they're neighborhoods everybody would recognize. Chapel Valley, Robbinsdale, Rapid Valley, North Rapid. They're just homogeneous areas. If you were looking for a house in North Rapid, you would be looking in this area, and that's where our neighborhood is.
And you currently have those laid out?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And we change them up. Every year there's some little tweak. I'll get my appraisers will say, you know, this end of this neighborhood here is more similar to the other one. We might move a boundary every year to be more accurate.
So you don't go from North Rapid to South Rapid to, I mean, I think.
We have almost 100 neighborhoods in Pennington County.
That you choose that kind of are similar or where?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. We had over 100, we've consolidated some. This year we split two. I think we're somewhere around 80 neighborhoods across the county. Now, when we collect all of that property data, all of that information, we bring it back to the office and we put it into our computer in our CAMA system. CAMA is an acronym for Computer Assisted Mass Appraisal. That is the computer software that values the property. It is very expensive. It is very good. It is a CAMA system that is used by many counties across the country. Most counties in Texas use the same CAMA system we do. It's very popular there. That's where the company originated from. But the entire state of Kansas and the entire state of Montana has purchased the software for all of the county offices. That's local here. Lincoln, whatever county Lincoln, Nebraska is in, is using the same CAMA system. There's several counties in Minnesota, and there's some on the East Coast that are using this CAMA system. There are many CAMA systems that computer companies have created. We're pretty proud of ours. It does work very well, and it is the best in South Dakota. There's another CAMA system that is better for the smaller counties. Ours is better than that. But theirs is pretty good. Ours is the best in South Dakota. We put that information into what amounts to one very large database. So we have all of that data, size, quality, condition, bedrooms, bathrooms, basement, garage. We have all of that information for every single property in the county, and that's in that database. And the CAMA system creates a valuation model. A valuation model is a math formula that represents the real estate market. That's what a CAMA system does. And then we value an entire neighborhood at once using all of that information that we have.
And in that mix, you throw in sales?
What?
Does sales get included in that?
Yes. We use the income approach to value pretty much just on a property-by-property basis when somebody comes in to appeal their property, because then they'll bring us that income and expense information. But we have a valuation model for the cost approach. Estimated replacement cost to build, less depreciation, plus land value. That's a valuation model. We also have a model for the sales comparison approach, which is a direct sales comparison.
And that CAMA, that software can merge those two notions of cost approach and sales approach?
It'll give us a value indication for both approaches. So your house, we will do a cost approach, and the cost approach says $103,000. And then we'll do a sales comparison approach, and it says $105,000. And we have to decide which one is more applicable to your property and which one do we trust more.
So you got two values. The software doesn't just say, here's the number the one number we recommend.
Nope.
Thank you.
But, and you got a model, and you gotta get the cost approach. So you load up all the information, 2 bedrooms, 2 bathrooms, okay. And then you go in and you say, okay, now drywall is now selling for $1 a sheet today. I mean, where does it get the numbers?
Well, we have to put that into the CAMA system, and we get those numbers for the cost approach, that the replacement cost, how much drywall and roofs and foundations cost. We get that from a company called Marshall & Swift. There used to be, and well, there still are, different companies that provide replacement cost information to appraisers in the U.S. There's getting very few. Marshall & Swift is the industry standard in the United States. And South Dakota law allows county assessors to use Marshall & Swift, and Vanguard is another company that has something.
You get a Marshall & Swift book that tells you what the cost of a cement block is.
We get a book, and then they actually give us numbers. They give the numbers to the software company who embeds it in our CAMA system.
And those are insurance companies, right?
Insurance companies use the same Marshall & Swift information. No, it's not an insurance company that does it. Marshall & Swift is a company that provides cost to build numbers to customers. Anybody who wants it could buy that book.
So how many different ones are there in South Dakota? 2, one for Eastern, one for Western?
No. Most counties use Marshall & Swift cost estimates, but it is adjusted by location. Now, I think South Dakota only has 2 locations, Rapid City and Sioux Falls. But when we get that Marshall and Swift book, I can tell you how much it costs to build a house in Alabama, if you tell me where in Alabama, because they have a location factor that adjusts those numbers to that location.
That's it's a major job.
Yes, it's a huge.
Although you get Marshall and Swift on a disc or something that you just feed in, you don't have to manually put all those numbers.
We get the book. I could do it by hand, but we don't get a disc. They will sell a disc. The appraiser that's working for a bank buys the disc. Marshall and Swift sells the numbers. We pay for it. They sell it to the CAMA system, and they put it into our CAMA system. So we don't actually physically put it in the computer.
That'd take a year to do that.
It's an update that we get, and it just updates with new cost figures, because it might cost more for drywall this year than it did last year.
Those are material costs.
Yep, and the assumption in the cost approach is if it cost more to build your house this year than it did last year, your house is worth more. Because if somebody's buying a house, they can't build one any cheaper, so.
And then those are wholesale retail prices, or one or both? One or the other or both?
It's not retail. It's if you went to build a house, how much it would cost you to build that house.
But I mean, the numbers in that, on the disc or in the book, they're wholesale prices for the materials.
Well, materials and labor and profit all together.
Well, but I understand, but the book is for material costs.
It includes.
All the way from nails to whatever.
It includes labor that goes into it. It's everything that costs to build that house, not just materials, because it costs more to, if a homeowner, if you were to build a house, you'd have to pay a contractor, and he'd have to pay labor and materials. So it's everything.
But the material costs in that book are what the constructor's cost is, or that's retail price?
Not retail. It'd be contractor's price.
What are the contractor, okay.
Yep, because he's gonna add overhead on top of that.
Well, he could have a markup, yeah.
Yep, and then that's included in our replacement cost.
Okay, thanks.
Now, we check those numbers every year. We do things to check and see, maybe not every year, but I've done it several times where I've checked to see how accurate the numbers we're getting for Marshall and Swift are. Because how do I know I can trust them? And I do, and they are accurate. They are pretty good. I actually talked to a contractor who was building houses one time, and he gave me a list of several houses that sold and exactly everything they had into those houses. And I checked it with our Marshall and Swift, and we were high on some and low on others, but we were very close, and in general, our numbers were good.
Nice.
Okay, so we get a value. We have, from the cost approach or the sales comparison approach or whatever, we get a value for this property. We're at market value. The Department of Revenue audits the accuracy of our assessment every year. Now, the primary measure of accuracy for a mass appraisal is a sale ratio study. And a sale ratio is a measurement of assessed value divided by sale price. See how this works.
Best value.
This is a sales ratio. Now, your house was assessed at $95,000, and you just sold it for $100,000. That means we were assessed at 95%. Okay? That is a sales ratio. And we do that for every property that sells. And this year, we have about 1,800 sales of open market transactions. Okay, the legitimate open market sales, not partnership transfers, not somebody bought it from their grandmother and she gave them a good deal. No, typical sales. We do that for every single one of them, and we measure that, that ratio on all of them. And I tell you, they will vary from 40% to 140%. Our goal is to be 100% at least on most of them. We can't be 100% on all of them because the real estate market is not perfect.
Arm's length transactions will have that greater range?
Yes. Yep. Because the market is not perfect. There is no formula out there that people sell properties by. Some people pay a high price, some people pay a low price. You bought a house and you paid $100,000 for it, and Nancy buys in Robbinsdale the house right next door, and she pays $105,000. And there's no difference. They're exactly the same. Well, there is no such thing as exactly the same kind of house, but let's assume they are. But Nancy loves the color blue, and that house was just so cool that she paid full price for it. You paid $100,000 because you're sort of obnoxious, and the guy got tired of you and settled for $100,000.
You kept at that guy until he got you price.
But there's things like that in the real estate market that we can't measure. Okay, there's emotions, there's life situations. There's the guy who's moving and I got a job somewhere else and I'm selling this house and walking away. I'm not making 2 house payments. There's too much of that goes on. So there is a variation. Now, 40% to 140%, yeah, that's pretty extreme.
That's pretty heavy.
But we are looking for at least most of them right around 100%.
Well, Shannon, if they're, like I just had a guy that, it was a $100,000 house and he bought it for $52,000. It probably was assessed at 100, so he bought it for 52. You have a lot of those going on? Because I see a lot of houses for sale right now that are selling for a lot cheaper, like I've seen on St. Pat in different areas that are selling for a lot cheaper than what they're appraised for. So you already know that from your papers, how
Yep.
many of those are?
Yep, we see the ratio on every single sale. Now, we have set a standard from this level to this level. If it sells that far off, we flag them and we go out and look at them. If somebody buys a $100,000 house for $52,000, okay, that ain't just something in the market. There's something wrong there.
Right.
And we go out and look at it. And in those Robbinsdale houses, what it tends to be is a repo or a rental and the house was trashed.
Right.
And we didn't know that. But when we say that, we go out and we look at it so we can get our data right. Of course, the property owner should appeal on something like that, but on those extremes, we try to make an attempt to go out and figure it out. Both the ones that sell low and the ones that sell high, too. If a $100,000 house sells for $180,000, they built a garage or they remodeled or they did something.
I just see a lot of people buying repos and different stuff right now, so I didn't know if that messed up
Yep.
your formula or did anything with
Well,
those 1,800.
That's why we got the variation. Yep. Not only is the market not perfect, but sometimes we don't know something about a house.
Right,
And I'm sure we've all heard,
that's why. it's
if the house is worth that much, it's yours.
What's that?
I'm sure, I've heard it, and I'm sure the rest of you have heard the same thing. Get the assessment notice, if the house is worth that much, it's yours, the government.
Oh, yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
and-
people
and-
say that.
And some of that's
Yeah.
blowing smoke, of course, and.
That's right.
And there might be some cases, but I think we've all heard it.
Yep. So what we do is we go look at the house, and then we look at what everything else is selling for.
Yeah.
Now, we look at every one of those ratios for, I guess I should be pointing up there, you can't see this. We look at every one of those ratios for all of the sales that take place. And this year we had about 1,800 of them. And the Department of Revenue, we give them that information, and then they calculate a median. We are not looking for the average sale ratio. The median is what's used. An average, you know what an average is? Well, a median is not technically the average, it's the middle number. The median in statistics is determined less influenced by the outliers and more representative of the whole data set. So state law requires the Department of Revenue to use a median. So on a median, we are looking at our median sale ratio. This year, our median is 98%. The Department of Revenue has not finalized that yet, but that's my estimate, and it'll be pretty close. On a median, we are assessing property at 98% of market value this year. Now, that 98% right here, that is our median ratio. But like the example of your feet in the stove and your head in the freezer, but on the average I feel fine. Okay, well we do have those extremes, 40 to 140%, but we want most of them grouped around 98%. And that is a measure called a coefficient of dispersion. Got a line here. Coefficient of dispersion measures how tightly grouped all of those sales are around the median. It is very good if most of the properties that sell have a ratio of within a few points of 98%. It is poor if they're spread all out like that. There always will be those outliers for good reason. Somebody bought something for their grandmother, somebody bought a repo house that was trashed and we didn't know it. There's circumstances like that those outliers happen. This year, our COD is about 10%. That means that the average property out of those 1,800 that sold last year sold within plus or minus 10% of 98% sale ratio. The average property last year was assessed between 88 and 108% of sale price. Okay, that's our COD. That is very good. State law requires that we have a COD of less than 25, plus or minus 25%.
Minus 25?
Yes. Yeah, that's really broad. International Association of Assessing Officers, or IAAO, requires that, that their standard is plus or minus, I think it's 10 to 15%. And it varies, you know, in Robbinsdale you can be really tight. In Rockerville, or I mean Rochford, it's a little bit tougher. But we not only far exceed the state standard for that COD, we exceed the IAAO standard as well. 10% is very good. And think about this. If you were to appraise a property and it's going to sell and you don't know what it's going to sell for, but you're going to appraise it and put a value on it, and the value you come up with is within 10% of what it sells for, that's pretty good. Any appraiser out there will consider that good, because no appraiser is going to appraise a property for sale price if he doesn't know sale price. If they know sale price ahead of time, a lot of appraisers tend to hit it right on the nose. Well, we don't know what they're going to sell for ahead of time.
In that range, that's a 90% range, 95% range, 98% range. You know, in other words, 95% of all the sales are going to be within that range?
That's another statistical measure. I said that the average property is going to be between 88 and 108. There's another statistical measure that'll give you the percentage, and I don't have that now. I don't know what that is. That is getting into some deep statistics. The average property that sold last year was assessed between 88 and 108% of sale price.
What does the state want you to be at? I know they, not 100, I know they want you to be at 100, but what do they allow?
The COD, 25% or less.
But what, the 98% figure, what do they want you to be at?
State law requires that we be at 100%, full market value. We measure the accuracy of our assessment based on a median. So in a perfect world, that median would be 100%. But it's difficult to hit 100%. We're pretty good at, I'm within 2% of it. That's cool. I'd hate to be at 102.
You know, my statement is going to be, I've told you this many times. In a perfect world, the law also says you can't over-assess a property more than its value. And to get 100% or even 98%, half of them are.
Well, but that's of sale price though. And our market is not one sale. That one property at 108%, that's just one sale.
Yeah, and it's over-assessed.
But that one sale is not the market. There's a common cliche in the appraisal world that one sale does not make a market. We look at 1,800 sales, and that one sale doesn't represent market value on its own.
And if that 98% were 90% and you had a 10%, you'd be anywhere from 80 to 100%.
That's right.
And that's pretty good.
That's pretty good?
And you're not over-assessing any property.
Okay, let me put that up here. Let's go down
Shannon,
here to 80.
Shannon, if I understood what you said earlier, what you're saying is that maybe that property that's sold at 108% is a family property.
Yep.
And I want to buy my grandmother's house, and I am willing to pay more to make sure that I get it.
And that happens all the time in our real estate market. All different reasons like that. There's life situations and emotions that take place in every sale that are different for every sale.
So then what that means?
We are shooting for the middle of the market.
I could like that blue color again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
so
right.
So what that really means is you would never, ever be able to know that. And we're better
measure
off
it.
as a county to be close to the 100% because there's another factor that comes into that.
Taxable value will reduce it down to 85. But for Ron's example, let's say that we were assessed, the average property was assessed between 80 and 100%. Okay, yours is at 100%. But there's somebody else, and a lot of somebody else's, that's assessed at 80%. That's not right. It's not.
Just as right as 108 to 88.
That's right. It's just as wrong to be over as it is under. We like to say it's happier when we're less, but no, that isn't fair either.
Because it'll be
But
raised
What's the
again.
difference between that and the 88 to 108? It's 20, either way you look at it.
Yep, that's right. But the law says full market value. We're going for 100%.
It also says you shouldn't be over-assessed.
Back to that one sale thing.
It's a conundrum for you, but.
Oh,
Well, to me, most significant is how many of the total are within that 98% plus or minus a couple of percent? That's the real question.
that COD, that 10%, the tighter we're grouped around that median, the better we are. That's right. The more we got grouped close, the better we are. We do not want a COD of plus or minus 25%. The average property is assessed at plus or minus 25%. That's horrible, but that's our state standard. We're at 10%. We're doing very good.
And reduced it to that.
Now, I understand, and if they talked in terms of one standard deviation, that'd be a lot more meaningful than a coefficient of dispersion. That doesn't mean anything to me.
Well, that you're getting into more statistics, and I don't have those numbers.
Anyway, thank you, go ahead, yeah.
Okay, so now we get to our tax formula. I'm going to try to add a page here.
Right, I understand.
Okay, this is our tax formula. Assessed value times the taxable factor. You got that. Get rid of that. All right, get that up out of the way. Okay, assessed value times taxable factor equal taxable value. Your assessment notice tells you the assessed value. And in South Dakota, that's full market value. In some states, assessed value is a percentage, and market value is something that doesn't show up on anything you see. But in South Dakota, assessed value is what we think full market value of your property is. Then we multiply that times the taxable factor, and we get taxable value. Taxable value is a percentage of assessed value. Taxable value is what you see on your tax bill. We get property owners that will compare the tax bill to the assessment notice. Last year's tax bill to this year's assessment notice. They're different numbers. They are different numbers. Taxable value is a percentage. The Department of Revenue gives us this taxable factor here, okay? They do an audit of our level of assessment, that 98%, they audit the level of assessment for every county in the state. And they give everybody, every county, a factor that reduces their level of assessment down to 85%. So if we were perfect, we're not perfect, we're awful close, but if we were perfect, we would be at 100%, and our taxable factor would be 0.85 to get us to 85% market value, okay? If our median level of assessment were 85, if our median level of assessment were 85, the factor we'd get would be 1.0, because the Department of Revenue gives every county a factor that reduces whatever your median level of assessment is down to 85. Now, our median level is about 98%. My estimate is 98% this year. The factor we're going to have is 0.86, okay? Because 98% times 0.86 equals 0.85. That factor will get us to 85%. We are almost 100, so our factor is almost 0.85. Now, the reason that the state does this is because no county, no school district in South Dakota collects enough local property taxes for its budget. The state has to supplement school districts, and they supplement at different levels.
I wish that were true. That's not true. Hill City and Custer and I think Lead get no state aid.
I think you're wrong. But that doesn't matter for this example. Okay, the state supplements most or all school districts in South Dakota. And if Custer County wants to assess property at 85% and Pennington County is at 100%, then Custer County is not pulling their own weight. The state would be supplementing more than they were in Pennington County. So by measuring the level of assessment for every county and giving every county a factor to reduce them down, however much it has to reduce to 85%, then taxable value is the same, every county, and then every county gets a fair share of state aid. That prevents some county from not collecting enough local property taxes. Now, if we were assessed at a median level of 80%, the factor we would get would be 1.05. The taxable value would actually be higher than assessed value to pull us up to 85%. Okay? And then there'd be a problem with the school district, because the school district would pick up on the fact that, hey, the county is not collecting enough locally, and there's problems with the school district. And there's been some history in South Dakota where the school district has sued the county for not collecting enough locally. But we're not in that situation. We're a long ways off of that.
And this is voluntary compliance with spot inspection for enforcement.
Oh, I don't know if you call it voluntary. They audit my office whether I like it or not.
But all the other 66 counties, yeah, we probably get audited, and so does the other big counties. But do all the 66 counties get
Yep.
checked?
Yep.
Okay.
Every county, every year.
Okay.
In fact, Department of Revenue publishes the numbers for every county on what the median level of assessment is for every county. You can get that. They're like 2 years behind. I wish they were more current.
Well, and that's it. The timing is, you could be, what's the word? You could have to go back and make up for some lost ground if you weren't taxing at the right level.
Okay.
Catch you after the fact.
Let's look at this. Let's say we're at 85% this year, and our market went up 10%. Our real estate market, then we better raise our assessments 10%, and then we're still only at 85. If our market really starts jumping, we could hit some significant increases. I'm more comfortable being at 98%, and as our market changes, I don't have to make such drastic changes. Right now in South Dakota, there are some counties that are facing some significant increases in assessments to just maintain that 85%.
And my point was, if they weren't applying that taxable factor,
well,
as prescribed, and they weren't inspected till after they already taxed their folks.
The county, I suppose, could not apply that taxable factor, but that's where the school district gets shorted money, and the school district sues the county.
Okay.
So, yeah, you're right. I suppose it's sort of voluntary, but we don't want to go there.
Okay.
If we are at 98% right now on our assessed values, if I lowered our assessed values, our taxable factor would be higher. I mean, right now, our taxable value is 86% of assessed value. If I lowered assessed values, taxable factor would be 95%, something like that. It'd make up that difference That's what that taxable factor does.
And that's by state law that that taxable factor has to be where it's at.
Yep. Yep.
Interesting, I didn't.
Some attempt at equalization is what it boils down to. And-
County by county, that's right.
And the argument you hear from Rapid City School District, and I'm kind of sympathetic to him, is sympathetic to them, the property is overvalued compared to the rest of the state. So their share of the state formula isn't.
But supposedly, this taxable factor makes it equal statewide.
Well,
I don't think that's quite what let's not get
Yeah,
into
I
that,
understand.
but.
That is the theory, and I think it's a good theory. It might not be absolutely perfect, but that's the theory. That's the reason behind our taxable factor. Okay.
Interesting. Know all that.
Do a new page. All right. Okay, so we got taxable value. That's on your tax bill. Then we have the levy. Levy is a number that represents dollars of tax per thousand of taxable value. That's the definition of levy. Dollars of tax per $1,000 of taxable value. The county assessor provides the county auditor with total assessed value. But in that, the state gives us a factor, so then we provide the county auditor with total taxable value. We have assessed every property in the county. The state gives us a factor, and we turn over those numbers to the county auditor. Here is the total taxable value for all of the property in Pennington County. And at that point, county assessor is done with it and would like to go hide in his cave and ignore everything that happens after that. But knowing what our total taxable value is, then the commissioners decide how much tax, how much budget we're going to collect out of that. The auditor then can calculate the levy. Some simple number here. Taxable value, let's say $1 million of value. I gotta think about this. 0.001. $10,000? Okay.
Any reason you picked on Ron's value? I mean,
okay. I give the auditor all the numbers, and I say there's $1 million worth of taxable value in Pennington County, and the commissioners decide we want a budget of $10,000. The auditor then just calculates the levy. 0.001. It's just a math formula, okay? Now, of your budget, that $10,000, that's the property tax portion of the budget. Pennington County's budget is less than half property tax. We get money from other places, license plate fees, recording a deed, grants, and a multitude of ways, charging for copies, okay? But property tax is 40-some% of our total budget. This $10,000 is just the property tax portion of our budget. So the commissioners, the city council, the school district, the road district, all of those taxing entities say we want this much budget, and the auditor says we got this much taxable value, and that levy is what gives you that much tax out of that value. The levy is just the result of a math formula. If taxable value decreases and you still want $10,000, then the levy's got to go up to collect $10,000 out of that taxable value. If taxable value increases and you don't increase your budget, the levy will go down. I have more control over the levy than you do because I can lower the taxable value or increase it, and the levy's going to change. You're sort of bound by how much budget you can collect. You've got that CPI and growth and all of that. If I cut the taxable value in the county in half, the levy would go down by half to collect the same amount. Or the levy would double to collect the same amount of taxes. The levy is just a math result. a change to a specific property. When we're doing boards here, property owner's gonna come in and he is gonna argue that you are assessing my property at this high because you want more taxes. And that's not true. Lowering his property assessment doesn't mean that you collect $9,999. No, that means that you still need $10,000 worth of budget to provide the services, so the levy is gonna have to increase on everybody else to collect the same amount of taxes. In South Dakota, it doesn't work that way where somebody's assessment gets lowered, then the county doesn't get that money. No, the county decides how much budget money we're gonna take out of that value. If we change one property owner's property assessment, everybody else pays more to make up for it. Okay, ag property.
Before you leave there, the mill levy application really is meaningless.
The mill levy is just a result of the math formula.
But it's an exercise that doesn't need to be done.
Well, you gotta have a mill levy because that is the tax and it goes on every tax bill.
The real number is the taxable your taxes for each taxing entity.
Yep, the taxing entity decides how much taxes we're gonna collect. The auditor says, well, we got this much value, so there's the levy that gives you that much tax.
So you merely divide, and this is the number it comes out for.
And that's the number it comes out, absolutely.
Then the number is meaningless, that .001 or .00 whatever.
It's just the result of the formula, yep, absolutely. It is sort of, it's sort of stupid to argue about what the mill levy does because the mill levy is influenced by changes in value and budget. Budget is the important thing.
It's amazing how many people don't understand it.
Yep.
Well, by golly, my mill levy went down, or my mill levy went up, without considering assessment. It's all about assessment.
Yep.
And the other factor, of course, is the budget.
When I was in Belle-Fourche, the mayor of Belle-Fourche campaigned on his re-election on the fact that the mill levy went down in Belle-Fourche while he was in mayor.
Yeah.
Well, at that time, we were adding gobs of property that was not on the tax roll previously, and we were raising values that were too low. So total taxable value increased. The levy went down because taxable value increased. They actually spent more budget-wise than they had any year in the past, but he bragged about the levy going down.
And the budget couldn't increase but 3% or CPI plus growth.
Yep, but that's right. But they hit all of those and did increase their budget. So their budget was higher than it was for the previous mayor, but he bragged that the levy went down.
And that's misrepresentation, basically. Yeah.
It is. Yeah, you're going to do the same.
Have been.
Yep. Okay, ag property. Ag property in South Dakota is not assessed at market value. That's not a surprise. That is the intention of the legislature and the citizens of South Dakota. In fact, ag property is assessed at significantly less than market value. Some property closer to market value than others, but at one time, 5 or 6 years ago, when this changed, ag property had some relationship to market value. And for many years, it was a very poor relationship. But at present, the ag assessment in South Dakota has nothing to do with what property is selling for. Ag property in South Dakota is assessed based on a productivity formula. We started that, I think 5 years ago maybe. The legislature adopted this productivity formula. When it was adopted, it was understood that most counties in South Dakota would not be assessed high enough and would have to increase assessments to reach that productivity number. Knowing that, the state legislature set limits on how much assessed value could increase every year. The productivity formula has its basis in crop production and crop prices. And the idea being we are going to tie the ag assessment to crop prices. The legislature adopted that and crop prices went through the roof. We saw $6 corn. Nobody had ever heard of $6 corn before. Okay, so now our productivity number kept going up. Those limits that the legislature placed on how much an ag assessment could increase every year, we were losing ground. So the legislature increased those limits the year before last. We have not reached our full productivity number. When we started this productivity assessment in Pennington County, we were thinking 3 to 4 years we'll hit that number, and then we got $6 corn. Okay, well, we're looking at 2 more years. We'll see an increase next year that's pretty significant, maybe 10%. And then the year after that, maybe it'll only be 4 or 5% or something. And then we'll have reached that limit. And at that point, from then on, our assessment will fluctuate with crop prices, up or down. And probably down because we're done with $6 corn. But we don't know. Another 2 years is what we're thinking now, but it depends on what happens with crop prices.
How many appeals have been the last few years on ag land out east?
They're pretty good.
10 maybe?
At first, there were quite a few.
Yep.
Because everybody was trying to figure out what it meant. But,
Yep.
I mean, Shannon and his other assessors did a lot of work. I mean, you guys really worked with they gave presentations, especially out in the eastern part.
Yep.
Gordon
Department of
went out
Revenue
there.
did as well. There was a lot of education.
Yeah.
And I've got something for you. I've got a handout here that is what we have developed in Pennington County here. Gordon created it when we started this productivity assessment.
Yeah, that's,
That?
Yep.
Yeah.
yeah, we got that, yeah,
one?
yeah, we
Oh, well,
have
we'll
that,
keep
yeah,
it.
it's, I guess where I was going with this, we haven't had and don't intend to have all the fuss they've had in the ag counties east.
We're not near as bad as what some of the counties in the east are. That's true. What you see from...
I think Fall River and Custer County have had a little bit of trouble with, and that's mostly
Meade-
pasture.
Meade
Yes.
County had the most trouble.
Yeah, in Meade County, yeah.
Meade County had a long way to go to
Pasture.
get to productivity because their ag assessment was so low to begin with.
Yeah,
Okay.
it wasn't.
Okay.
What you see from this is it shows the process of how we get to our ag value.
I saw it.
The county's involvement is in the red. Everything else comes from the state. SDSU, National Ag Statistics Service, Department of Revenue, the legislature created a cap rate, all of that, and after all of that information is collected, the state gives us a number for our ag assessment. They actually give us two numbers, one for crop soils and one for range soils. And that's been part of the argument in a lot of counties is why is there crop soils and range soils and all of that. The value we get is a top dollar value. Okay, $400 an acre. So that is the value the state gives us. Top dollar value is $400, and it ain't $400, I don't know what it is. But for example, $400. We still have the same soil ratings that we used to in the past. And that value is distributed to all of the properties in the county based on the quality of the soil. If the very best soil in Pennington County is $400, then half as good soil has a rating of 0.5, would be assessed at $200. Okay, it's a way to adjust ag assessments based on the quality of the dirt. So we get that productivity number and we put it into the computer, and based on the average rating for each parcel, it has a value usually less than that $400. Now that every county has a soil inventory for all of the soils in the county, and the very best one is identified as 1. That is the best soil. Now our best soil in Pennington County is one of the worst ones in Brookings County, okay? Really, we don't have that good of dirt. There's some dirt we think is pretty good, but people in Brookings don't call it good dirt. So those soil ratings are relative only to Pennington County. But it's a way to adjust those assessments based on soil quality. We get a rating for crop and grass. There is no parcel out there that has all crop soils, and there's no parcel that has all range soils. And we get a lot of arguments about I've got 40 acres and there's 10 acres of crop rated soils in this, but I ain't farming any of it. Well, that doesn't matter. They're still better soils and they have a crop rating. There have been bills before the legislature every single year since we started the productivity assessment to assess ag land based on the actual use of the property, whether it's cropped or grass. And they failed every single year. And the Ag Task Force is going to take it up again next year. But at present, the legislature has said we do not assess based on actual use. The theory here is highest and best use. You have crop soils. You could crop it if you wanted. Even if they're not cropped, they're still better than grass soils. But that's still an argument we get. Now, if we assess our ag land at the value that the Department of Revenue gives us without making any funky adjustments, we have a taxable percentage of 85%. Our ag land, we have a taxable factor for non-ag and a taxable factor for ag. Our ag taxable factor has been 85% since we started the productivity assessment. That's not true with every county. There are some counties have played with the numbers, so the Department of Revenue raises their factor up. We are at 85%, and we want to stay at 85%. Because if you adjust too many properties against what the Department of Revenue approves, the Department of Revenue will raise that factor on everybody. The people you didn't adjust now have a higher taxable percentage. We do make adjustments, though, to some ag properties, but we only do those in very extreme and unusual situations. And the classic one is the Badland Butte.
Yeah.
And we've got crop soils up here, okay? Ain't no way in the world you could ever farm that. Okay, we'll make an adjustment for it. We will change the, we won't change the rating, but we'll make an adjustment that essentially gives it a range rating for those acres up there, and it makes a very minimal difference in the assessment, but property owner tends to be happy when we do that. But we only do it in extreme circumstances. We have property that we had that was an ag property today. The property owner had an argument there about some of his soils that had crop ratings, and everybody complains about the crop ratings because it has a higher value. Nobody's going to complain about the range rating because it just doesn't have a very high assessment. But he had some crop-rated soils, and he said they're not very good, they're rocky, gravel pit almost. And we go out and we look at it. You're right, this is very rocky stuff. But we open up the soil book and we look at that soil and it says very rocky. And it has a rating that reflects that. So there's nothing unusual about that property because that same soil everywhere else in the county is rocky. And we're not going to adjust his property because that situation exists everywhere. Now that Badlands Butte, okay, that's an extreme example. We do make adjustments. We'll make an adjustment or we'll recommend that the board make an adjustment during an appeal, but it's only in extreme circumstances where we find a situation that doesn't exist on any other property. We can't adjust one property when that same situation exists everywhere. Okay, that's ag and non-ag. That's what we do when we assess property. Some of the other functions we do. We maintain the owner-occupied classification. All properties assessed at market value. But it's either owner-occupied or not. That determines the levy. The owner-occupied levy is less than a non-owner-occupied levy. We maintain the application process and the classification. We maintain the application for an ag classification. We take applications for exempt properties. The commissioners approve or deny requests for exemption from property taxes, but that application comes to my office and we inspect the property. We also maintain all of the tax relief programs like elderly assessment freeze, disabled veteran, paraplegic exemption, renewable resource energy credit, historical moratorium, discretionary formula. We have to maintain all of that. The property is still assessed at market value, but we have to identify all of those and give them the reduction in assessment or the classification that gives them the lower levy. We also manage transfers of ownership. Every time there's a deed recorded or a title transferred on a mobile home, we have to change that in our tax record because we need to send the assessment notice and eventually the tax bill to whoever owns it. So all of those ownership transfers are a massive endeavor. We have 1,800 sales last year, but there was probably 5,000 transfers of ownerships because not everything is a sale. It might be a gift or a divorce or partnership transfer. Linda in our office maintains all of that, and that's a lot of work. Changes of address, changes of owners. We also do the mapping, parcel mapping. You look at RapidMap. RapidMap is a cooperative effort between the city and the county. The city maintains the map. They do the computer work for the map. Luann in our office draws on the map and creates the tax parcels. Luann is an anomaly in the GIS world. She started computerized mapping before there were computers. She was working in an assessor's office and then started drawing on paper maps. And when we got computers, she went on to that, and she is now doing what 20-year-old girls get college degrees for, or boys. She has just been doing it before it was on a computer. Several counties have professional experts that they have hired with college degrees. But that's what we do with the mapping. Luann draws those parcels in, along with roads and easements and other things. We maintain a website in cooperation with our software company. And I say this a lot, and I've been made fun of for bragging, but Pennington County has the best website of any county in South Dakota. We put all of our assessment information online. Everything we know about your property is available online. You can get that property card that we have online. You can see sales of property on RapidMap. We'll mail you some sales if you want, but you can look at them on RapidMap too. No county in South Dakota does that. There's 66 counties in South Dakota, and something like 16 of them have something on the internet. None of them have all of their information, and all of them charge for what little information you can see. We put all of our information online for free. We also have some Excel files that are massive files where every property in the county and all of those details are on one line in an Excel file. Because we get requests from companies that want to know all of the assessment information for all of the properties in Wall or something like that, or the entire county. We have put those on an Excel file, and then we just don't deal with those companies anymore. They download that Excel file and they play with it and do whatever they want with it. It's free. It is very good to have all of that information online. We get some criticism about people that are using it for some use we don't like, telemarketers. Everybody hates telemarketers. Well, telemarketers have access to names and addresses and properties, but it is very difficult to keep telemarketers from getting that information and still allow the homeowner in his home to look at it. So it's free for everybody. It eliminates a whole lot of work from our office. We don't have to take those phone calls. Can you send me a copy of my assessment? More than happy to, but you can print it out yourself right now, and we show them how. People look at their assessment and their neighbor's assessment every year, and we know that. We are not getting the appeals we used to because they're able to check theirs and their neighbors. A lot of times people would appeal not knowing everything about their property or how their neighbors were assessed, and we're not getting that anymore. It's a wonderful thing. And that's all I have.
That's very interesting, thank you.
Yes.
Well, go back to the
You mentioned depreciation early on. Is there a standard for determining that? And if so, what is it?
Well, we estimate cost to build. Let's go to a new page. Replacement cost new. $100,000. That's what it costs to build that house new. Then we subtract depreciation.
feels like that we're recording this.
Okay. There's no perfect formula.
I haven't asked.
But Depreciation in the appraisal world comes in three forms. Physical depreciation, which is ordinary wear and tear. Functional depreciation, that is something about that building, how it's built, that makes it unfit for its use. A house with a bathroom behind the kitchen, nobody wants a house like that. Oh, our old office building over there. If you were in it, all of the offices were chopped up. Ain't nobody in the world would build an office building like that. There was some functional issues with that building. It would cost more to build that building the way it was built with all those little offices chopped up, but nobody would pay that to do that. Then there's external depreciation. Has absolutely nothing to do with the building. The building is fine. It might be brand new, but it's located next to a sewage lagoon. Something outside the property that affects value. We have to identify those three forms of depreciation. Now, functional and external are very rare. They don't affect very many properties. Nobody builds next to the sewage lagoon. Nobody builds a bathroom off the kitchen. Tend to avoid that because nobody wants that. But every property ages. That's physical depreciation. So we have to make a judgment call on it. There is no formula. It would be nice if a 5-year-old house was 5 years old, but that doesn't work. We have to make a judgment call on what we call effective age. A 25-year-old house might have had a new roof and new siding and a bathroom remodeled and a kitchen remodeled. It is now not 25 years old, it's 18 years old. It's absolutely purely a judgment call. And we identify that effective age based on the condition of that house as we look at it right there. And we measure that with depreciation studies to make sure we're coming in right. We spend a lot of time to make sure our judgment is right. We spend a lot of time making sure that one appraiser estimates 18-year-old effective age and the next one does the same thing for the same house somewhere else. But it is a judgment call. In the appraisal world, an appraisal is an estimate of value, which means it's an educated guess. There is a lot of judgment that goes into it, and depreciation is just our estimate of it. Now, we stand in front of that house and we say it's 18 years old, and then we get an appeal. And the property owner allows us to come out and look at it, and we get inside. He ain't done nothing to the inside of this house. Maybe he's punched holes in the walls. Okay, and there's a lot worse than that in some people's houses. We will adjust our estimate of depreciation because we didn't see everything.
So it's kind of arbitrary.
It's not arbitrary because arbitrary means no rhyme or reason from one to the next. No, we have to be consistent, but it is a judgment call. There's no formula that gives you that. Well, we can calculate a formula, $100,000 house, but the roof was replaced, and it cost $10,000 to replace a roof. So it was $90,000, but they replaced the roof, so now it's $100,000. Well, but not really, because it had a roof. It was just in poor condition. So maybe it wasn't. Maybe it was only $92,000, and they spent $10,000 to replace the roof. But you know, there's some things you do with your house that you spend more money than what you're going to get back in value. There's some things people do with paint colors on the inside of their house. They paint their bedroom black, and they spend $1,000 to do it, and it actually hurt the value. So there is no exact formula. It does come down to a judgment call.
With the depreciation that Lindell's taught about, it's no relation to depreciation for income tax purposes.
That's true.
Relationship is coincidental, if any.
Nope, that's right. Because with your income tax purposes, you have a whole different goal. And in fact, you can take all of the depreciation in 1 year on your income tax.
Yeah.
But depreciation doesn't happen that way. It slowly happens.
Do you depreciate farm buildings at all?
Yes, just like any other building. Every building depreciates.
Along the same lines of income tax purposes or not?
No, nothing to do with what you're doing for income tax purposes. Now, some buildings depreciate faster than others. A low-quality house, a nasty, trashy, nobody in this room would live in one of those houses, depreciates faster than an excellent quality house because excellent quality houses are just built better, they last longer. Farm buildings tend to depreciate faster than some commercial properties because they're not built as good and they get a lot harder use. tend to. So different buildings depreciate differently, and we get depreciation schedules from Marshall and Swift, who has spent a considerable amount of time studying this. Marshall and Swift will tell us that a typical house will not last, but have value for 60 years without remodel. Okay, now every house gets remodeled in some way. But we use their depreciation schedule, and that way we're consistent on every property across the county. But it still comes down to a judgment call of what is the effective age of this house I'm looking at right now.
I often use Marshall and Swift for assessing houses.
Every house. That is our...
I mean, do you contract with them at all?
Well, they give us the numbers. We pay for those numbers. They give us those numbers. Yep. Well, we get the book, but we also get the numbers in the CAMA system.
But this is a separate issue. Well, I mean, back up and ask the more generic question. 15, 20, whatever it was, the county contracted. Can you now, by law, contract out?
Yep.
And who has to approve that?
County commissioners.
I mean, so you have to come to us and bid it out.
Yeah.
Let's say you're short of assessors, or for whatever reason you have to do more assessments, so you can come to us and ask for a supplement or whatever to contract.
Yep, I could.
Okay.
Now,
But you can't do it on your own.
Oh, I suppose I could, but the budget ain't big enough. It'd never happen. Like $1.5 million. My budget ain't high enough to do that and everything else we do. Ain't no way in the world I'd be able to do it. I suppose I could contract with somebody to do a small project, but we don't need to.
But you could do that.
Yeah, if it's within my budget.
Okay.
But there's pros and cons to that. The county was not happy with it when they did it 20 years ago. You run that risk with any contractor you do business with. You pay him, and if you're not happy with the result, you're stuck with it, and you have to live with it. There's pros and cons. We have enough staff that we will be able to maintain good reappraisal cycles with what we have. We have good professional staff. Harding County doesn't pay enough and doesn't hire enough, and that might be something they'd consider. Of course, Harding County doesn't have much to appraise. Okay, maybe some other county, Custer or Fall River County, where they actually have a lot of property but not very many staff, that might be something they'd look at.
And since you mentioned that, and I hate to take any more time, but just happened to notice in the paper the other day, that Custer was advertising, Custer County, for assessors, and the price was, the wages was like $15 an hour or something, and it had to be a misprint. Can you get an assessor for that kind of money? Anybody that knows what he or she's doing?
Can I or can they?
Well, what would you expect? I think like $14, $15, $16 an hour.
Yeah, well, there's counties that pay less than that. There are counties whose assessor, who has my position, of course there might only be 2 people in the office, who are making $25,000 a year at their job.
And the government's relying on them to give an assessment of market value.
Yep.
That's probably why the Department of Revenue audits every year.
Wow.
Well, the Department of Revenue has to audit to make sure we're doing our job. And I've told you before that there's a comprehensive audit. There's the audit that measures our level of assessment. That's one audit. But they also do a comprehensive audit of everything we do in our office, and are we doing everything properly?
But how much training, education, what?
To be a county assessor in South Dakota, anybody that puts a value on a property for assessment purposes has to be certified with the state as an assessor. Now, the appraiser, that's the independent appraiser that's working out there, he has a certification which is similar, but it's still different. We are certified as assessor appraisers. We have to, within a year of being hired, we have to take 5 independent study courses, pass all 5, then pass a test, a certification test. And then every year after that, we have to maintain continuing education, which amounts to school with a test, a week-long school with a test at the end of it, and a conference and a workshop every year to maintain our certification. If we don't maintain that certification, we lose that certification, then that appraiser in our office can't put value on property. Some counties will hire temporary help during the summer to help with reappraisal projects, but they have to be very careful that that temporary help is not involved with placing a value, which amounts really to driving a car and holding the dummy end of a measuring tape. But some counties do that because that's more help than nothing.
And real quickly, the assessment notice, that's the true value.
Yes.
And the number, if you have a discount for owner occupied or disabled or old age or whatever those discounts are, those wind up being factored in by the auditor.
There's a catch there, the way you're saying that. Your assessment notice goes out full value. Tax bill has taxable value.
Oh, I understand.
But there's some of those tax relief programs that are actually assessment reductions. The disabled veteran is a perfect example of that. A 100% disabled veteran can get $100,000 tax-free off his property. So if he owns a $200,000 house, he's only paying taxes on $100,000. Now, we will mail out the assessment with $100,000 on it because that's the practical way to make that happen. It'd be nice if we could mail it out at $200,000 and make that step happen after my office and between us and the auditor, but there's just no practical way to make that happen. So we do get a couple of phone calls every year. Somebody says, how come my neighbor's house is assessed at $100,000 and mine's just like it and it's assessed at $200,000? We tell them, your neighbor there has a veteran's exemption and there's $100,000 taken off.
And that's the exception.
Yes.
Everybody else gets a deduction.
See,
They're still on their tax note, or their assessment notice is still full market value.
Yes.
There's just that one exception.
Well, no, elderly assessment freeze is another one. It's an assessment reduction. If you are 65 and older and meet a income threshold, low enough income, your property can be assessed at whatever it was when you turned 65. Now, if you're 66 years old, your property will be assessed at whatever it was last year. You're not getting much. But if you're 95 years old, your house is assessed at whatever it was 30 years ago. You're getting something there. The assessment, okay, now I was going to say the assessment notice goes out with that lower value, but I'm talking myself into a circle. That is full value, and we apply that elderly assessment freeze after that notice. So that isn't an exception. The veterans one might be the only one.
That's the only one. And so Julie has the total valuation of, for whatever taxing entity.
Yep.
And then there's a discount for all those
taxable
things,
value.
all those things.
Yep.
Before she applies the mill levy.
That's right. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. The levy is applied to the taxable value, and that $100,000 for the veteran is not taxable. The church, there's a value there, but it's not taxable. And with those churches, we don't mail out an assessment notice with a value on those. In a perfect world, we would assess churches and courthouses and city office buildings and all of that. But if they're not ever going to pay taxes on it, we got too many other properties to look at. So
52,000, is that what you said the property?
52,000 parcels,
Exempts do we have?
47,000 taxable.
The
Now-
5,000 exempts, basically.
And there's some of that there's a lot of that that's government property.
10%.
But there's a lot of that that's government, that it ain't just churches and charities. But there is a lot of exempt property in Pennington County. Now, there's been talk in our state legislature and in states across the country about making some of these exempt properties, making less of them exempt, or making them pay some part of the taxes that might represent whatever some minimal service is.
Agreed with that, then maybe don't have to pay the school tax, but I don't know why they don't pay police and fire protection, because they expect it when
Yeah.
the place is on fire.
And there's always talk about that, and I have told some of these people that I see that coming in the future someday.
How many parcels do we have, did you say?
Well, I sure thank you, Shannon. I hope everybody.
Yeah, that's great. It's always good to hear it.
And this is
47 taxable.
accessory 101, and the next time will be 101 and a half, and you'll talk about multiple regression analysis for Deb. And
I have a presentation on that. We had a regional conference with something like 10 states around us, and I made a presentation on that. That was really pretty cool.
okay. I'd like a refresher. It's been long.
Did he
long-
just say, what did he
Been a long,
say
long
again?
time. I've volunteered.
My name and your phrases over there, George.
He's volunteered to have
Thank you, Shannon.
assessment 101 and a half, no, not two, just a half, for
Guy on the
a
end.
multiple regression analysis for
I got it, dude.